before it was just this nasty, horrible looking, dirty, grimy, if you can believe it, is so rusted out it won't even hold the bushing. Hello everyone, welcome back to Maverick Mods. Well, work continues on the Firebird as usual. Next step, I've got to get the front subframe mounted up on the car. Took a little bit more work than normal, and you'll see why. So, stay tuned. It's 2 days, the next day, the day after the next day. It's a few days from whenever I left off before. Anyway, what we have here is we have a subframe ready for mock-up and installation. Not permanent, but at least installation, so I can start mocking up other parts. Hold on. So you have a nice pretty subframe there. How did that happen? Because before it was just this nasty, horrible looking, dirty, grimy. Okay, let's go back in time and watch this. One of the many steps in getting this Firebird back on the road is getting the subframe cleaned up. I've been in the process of sandblasting it, and I decided to stop about halfway through just because I need to address something which is very common on these, especially these old F-bodies, but very common on all of the, even the full-size GM cars. Anything with a full frame or subframe that uses body bushings to secure the chassis to the body itself. And that is the holes here for the subframe bushings. So I'm going to show you one that's not in terrible shape, but not in great shape. Let's see if we can get a good angle at it here. Okay, so this hole right here is actually an alignment hole. It aligns the body to the subframe itself. This is the hole for the bushing itself. So, give you an idea, this is what a factory bushing looks like. And this thing sits like so. Body on top sits in the hole, and then there's a little cup. If we can get an angle here, where it just sandwiches in between there. Okay, just like that. All right, all fine and good so far. However, the very nature of this type of arrangement means water is going to collect in here and is not going to go away. So what you tend to see a lot of times is, for example, this is the best of them. This hole is supposed to be 1.5 inches in diameter. And we're not too far off, 1.564 or 1.56, okay? Not too far off. Let's go look at the other side. One side does not look like the other side. This, if you can believe it, is so rusted out it won't even hold the bushing. Okay? Now, I don't normally rant, but I'm going to rant just a little bit. This subframe had been reinstalled in the car like this, and the only thing holding this side of the car to the subframe, just barely, was that washer. It literally was about to pull completely through. If you go and look at the back, got a similar situation, although they're not quite as rusted out, but we had new bushings. Now these were not old bushings in here. Somebody, I'm not pointing fingers, but somebody had gone through and replaced the bushings like this. I mean, we're supposed to have 1.5 inch, a 1.5 hole, and it's not even close. It's so rusted out. And on the final corner, we have kind of what's left of a 1.5 inch hole, but everything else is just rusted out to just almost nothing. So here's my rant. This is a safety issue. This right here, that subframe would not have held to the body. Who knows? But guys, if you're doing this kind of work, pay attention to this right here. I'm going to repair this, and I'll show you how I do it coming up. In order to fix these holes in the subframe, all I had to do was cut up some templates. For the rears, fairly easy. I was able to find enough of the existing hole, the 1.5 inch hole, to be able to locate, and I had some old templates made up. So this is out of just a piece of cereal box. This is from an old A&W root beer 12-pack box. Doesn't matter what it is. But I had this left over from years ago. So just check things out. And it lines up just exactly where it is. Excuse me, and it lines up exactly where it needs to be. So it allowed me to locate the hole, and I just made my mark on the outside. And what I'll do is I will just cut the old metal out and fabricate a new piece using this template. And for the other side, you just flip the template over, and there you go. You got it made. So your holes are lined up right where they need to be. The fronts were a little bit different. I had to actually make up two templates, and in this circumstance the reason was there's enough metal remaining on this subframe mount. This one I don't need to mess with, but I did use this in order to make a template for the other side, where there's absolutely no way to even know where the hole is supposed to be for alignment purposes. So what I did was I took the other side, made a template that fit the other side, and just to line it up, the alignment holes, just stuck a socket in it. That's my handy dandy 10mm socket. So I used that to figure out where the hole goes. Then I made another template that actually gets me out to good metal. So I'd stacked the templates like that, and then made some alignment marks. Took my alignment template off, and then with my alignment marks I could go back and set my template in place. And again, I'll know where to cut out the bad metal and the rot on the subframe mount, and I can use this as my template to cut the new replacement insert. So let's go cut some metal. I do recommend, before cutting any of the metal out of the subframe itself, that you actually cut your templates first. That way you can just kind of test fit your templates against the subframe and just make sure that it actually fits. And in this case, I think I did pretty well. Okay. So on the far side, I'm not replacing that one. On this one, you know, sometimes just based on how bad this is rotted out, sometimes you have to get a little creative in the shape of the replacement piece itself. You can buy actual replacement inserts. However, they're usually just circles, and in this case I don't think it would have been big enough to cover out everything that's been rotted. And here I had to kind of get out far enough to get past some of this rotted metal, and so the metal is just really thin as you get, you know, kind of real close to the edge. So that's kind of the reason for the shape of this. So we'll get that cut out. One of the things on the rear subframe holes that you got to consider is on the inside edge you actually have two overlapping sections, and you can kind of see it right up in here. You've got an inner portion of the frame and you've got an overlapping outer portion of the frame. Sometimes this inner frame portion will be rotted out. In my case it's not. The very edge of it is right there, but it's not really an issue. And same thing on this side. So there's one of two ways to deal with that. If your inside edge here is still good, you're good. You can just grind away at the weld, flatten it out, replace the top piece. If your inside edge is rotted, yeah, you got a little bit of a problem because you do need to replace that. My solution is, instead of cutting two pieces, and in my case I'm not really trying to recreate the factory weld seam here, so what I do, if you can see this, the factory uses, I believe this is 12 gauge steel. My replacement piece is 1/8 inch, so it's slightly thicker. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this entire section out, including out to this edge on the inner portion of the subframe itself. And when I go to weld it in, I will be flush here, but I'll be slightly proud of the surface here. But I will have enough metal, because I've got a thicker piece to begin with, that I can recreate this whole area right here without having to cut two separate pieces. So I'll get the cutting wheel out, we'll cut out our parts and go from there. Okay, gloves, probably a good thing for this. There we go. So this front mount's going to be a little bit harder to cut out just because, well, I can't really get the grinder in there, or the cutoff wheel in there. I'm going to try the body saw number 1. I've got some ideas if this doesn't work very well, but let's see how well this works. This is where the problem comes in when you try to make a sharp radius. The blade is just a little bit too thick. Alright, plan B. Let's try a carbide bit on the die grinder. See if that works. I've got basically a tight fit here, very little gap. Now normally, if this were sheet metal, this is not good. I'd want a gap in there. What I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to bevel the edge all the way around both the insert, and as best I can I'm going to put bevel on the outside portion as well. That way I can get good penetration throughout the whole thing. And in this case I don't need to create a gap. I can do the same thing back here, or I could put a gap in. It doesn't really matter as long as I get good penetration all the way around. So let me clean up these cutouts and do a final fitting on the inserts, and we'll get those welded in. Okay, welds are done. The beauty of not doing a factory restoration is I don't even have to dress these welds. If I was doing a factory restoration, yep, I would dress those so that you couldn't see it. But as it sits now, I think it's good to go. I've got good penetration everywhere. I've got a solid repair. Once I get the subframe cleaned up, we can get this back in the car. We can start test fitting some parts. I'm back. So now you saw what it took to repair the spots on the subframe. After I got that done, I finished up sandblasting. I got some epoxy primer on it, and now we are here. And with that, the front subframe is ready for installation. Won't be a permanent installation. We still have to come out a few times, and there's some pretty heavy modifications that will need to happen to fit the LS1 and the new front suspension. But for now, it's done, and I'll detail a little bit about actually installing the subframe in the next episode. Certainly appreciate everybody watching. Big thank you to everybody. Please like, share, and subscribe. It certainly does help me out. Everybody, have a great day.